Let me turn now, if I may, to Patrick. And Patrick, if you could give us your perspective, and I know you will also focus a little bit on how the technological revolution is changing the nature of the workplace.
Mr. Moderator, thank you. First preliminary comment on the topic. I said man is a creature of habit, and this explains you always have a gap between the new technology and its adoption by the society and its citizens. So just to put things in perspective, being with Capgemini is a 12.5 billion revenue IT services company, but that means we have 185,000 employees today, out of which 95,000 in India. So my focus on contribution will be on automation and labor, which is often talked about. And I'll start with a few observations and propose then two paths forward, possibly. The first is on automation. We hear a lot, we talk a lot about automation. I say in IT, this is the essence of IT. Automation is the essence of IT. And there are three types. We look at it as three types of automation. One that is known for long. This is where you monitor. You monitor systems, you monitor activities. It exists for decades. Now you have a new type of automation. This is everything related to industrialization. You first saw it on the shop floor. Now you are seeing it in the IT shop floor. This is how you do robot process automation, IT process automation. And then there is a third that is the most talked about. This is everything called cognitive. Cognitive is artificial intelligence, machine learning, predictive analytics. This area exists only since we have big data, because otherwise you have no use case, you have no economic case to invest whatsoever in cognitive technologies. This is only the amount of data and the value you can extract from it that has allowed this development. What we are seeing now is not an incremental development. What we are seeing now is a combination of these different types of automation, and that's what is hurting, notably, the labor market. And when you look now economically on what automation is and related to labor, the first, most evident, that obvious one that is much talked about is efficiency. Efficiency is about cost savings, it's about productivity improvement. So yes, this is eliminating labor. But there is a second business value, which is efficiency. Efficiency is all about the quality of your processes, about the productivity. It affects labor, but not in the same way. It even creates new opportunity. And the third element is about the business outcome. It completely changed business model. It completely changed industries. We just heard about media. We'll hear about hotel or entertainment, or the way you will define it, Sébastien. So this is generating opportunities for new type of activities. So automation is not just one word. We need to look at the 3x3 approach, possibly the way I just described it. Now the impact on labor is massive and is multiform. The first one we see is the relationship, notably of the new generation to the employer. The employee-employer contract is disappearing. We are recruiting now people in their mid-20s who state, arriving with us, our ambition is to have 4 employers experience by the age of 30. A few years ago, everybody would come and say, I want to make a career, I love your company. So here, what you see, the shift socially, is that the people think what matters most is to enrich their ability to network. They know they are on their own, and they know that they have to build their own currency. And in this respect, I would like to give one example. In the Valley, there is a company called Geekster. Geekster is a network of geeks. There are about thousands of the top schools. They are all freelancers. And they are 60% of them are Airbnb all year long. They don't even have a personal address. They travel. They work 60 to 80 hours per week. And this company has established something called, which is a currency called Karma. And these members, these top developers, are more fighting to get the currency, the Karma currency, that increase their value than fighting for the remuneration on the job. Remuneration matters, obviously, but it shows this importance of this networked economy and the importance of the individual aspect. I mentioned in automation the third part, notably around the cognitive. These are, in fact, powerful tools. As you've seen in the previous session on healthcare, these are extremely powerful tools. These create opportunities, what we call it the augmented workforce. So the workforce today has the ability to do much more, not only in volume, as we've seen with the genome, but also in quality. So that creates new opportunity. For instance, mathematicians have jobs outside of financial services. Effectively, they have jobs everywhere, which was not the case before. Of course, there is a kind of segregation. So the challenge is on reskilling. And here, this is a pretty unfair picture when you look at the labor situation, because there are people who have the ability, some core competencies to be reskilled, and every company, I believe, and certainly ours, is investing massively in reskilling because you have a good business case in reskilling. Unfortunately, there is a significant percentage that we will not be able to reskill, and that will create a question for the company, notably in terms of cost, but also for the society. Then at the opposite, you have a talent war. The talent war is global. It has always existed when we had an increase in technology evolution. But here, I said, Toby comes from Bangalore. You look at Bangalore today, it was a hot place for outsourcers. Now it's a hot place for everything. It's a hot place for startups. India GDP is growing by 7%. Good monsoon this year, it will continue to grow next year. So FDI is increasing. So if you look for talent in Bangalore, be ready to pay. It's extremely expensive. And wherever you go, because, and that was what was mentioned before, it's micro media possibly and certainly, but it is micro in everywhere. You have micro ecosystems for every type of solution, and so you need specialists. And there is this dichotomy between the population we had before, and I mentioned the reskilling, and now what you need to do. One example, for instance, there is a company also created by a French entrepreneur based in the West Coast called Upwork. While working with them, I was looking for a blockchain expert, as to be mentioned, on Upwork. I found someone in Kerala. In Kerala, he was charging by the hour what we pay by the day. So, but it's normal because he's on a global marketplace. So even if he delivers from Kerala, it doesn't matter because he has skills that are in demand globally. So he can command a premium. Then there is two other more social aspects. One is the labor part and the taxation of labor. We heard a comment earlier from the Deputy Secretary of OECD. Is fund a big part of our welfare system. With all these changes, it will create a gap, and we will have to address it. And if we look at the success or lack of success of ideas such as the tax Tobin, I doubt that the answer is to have a tax on machine transaction or transaction per machine. But there will be a gap because this notion of employer status funding the welfare system will be hurt by this transition. And lastly, last observation is that all what I describe is very similar to what we call or what we see in other aspects of the so-called shared economy, what we see in transportation, what you will hear in entertainment or hoteling. In fact, these are technologies that allow to target economic inefficiencies and transform them in pool of profit. That's my definition of shared economy. Little maybe caricatural, but at least it's simple enough. And then labor is inefficient today. The labor market is inefficient today, and it's a huge volume of spend. The total spend is massive. So expect with this new generation also that has understood it and positioned itself for this. The problem for society is, of course, the new generation. We heard about unemployment in some geographies, and we know it, but it's the whole lifespan with also the more senior population. So two ideas that we see. One that I try to put into practice, it's a very difficult one, is that I don't believe anymore in one employment status. We'll have to go to something much more granular. We'll have a diversity of status. Today we know an employment status, civil or private company. You're an independent, you're temporary, by the way that was already a first attempt, or you're unemployed. Today we will have tens of different status, and this is a big challenge on to adapt to it. I cite only one issue is pension. How do you manage, if this model will remain, how do you manage it? But I believe the multiplicity that will allow the flexibility based on to address the situation that I briefly described in my few observations is needed. The second, and I will finish with this, but it's more well-known, but I think it's interesting if you have questions to debate, is basic or universal income. I'm Swiss, we voted massively against it, 77%, because it was too early, it was ill-defined. But Finland will make pilots, and I think this might be an interesting avenue, but that implies a disconnect between labor and revenue. But there is a social challenge and there is a disconnect that will need to be addressed. So, Mr. Moderator, my short contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And it would be interesting to ask yourself, in 10 years' time, now you say you have about 185,000 employees. In 10 years' time, do you think you'll have 180,000 or more people associated with you, but how many of them will be employees? You know, it may only be 185 or 1,850 or 18,500. And I think that's part of what you're getting at.
I will not comment because we have to address it with the International Workers' Council before, but absolutely, this is a big debate right now.
Thank you. And you also, I think we should come back to the question you raised about what this implies for the way in which we think about old age security and pensions. And I would say in the United States, for example, for many people, if not most, their health insurance is linked to their employment status. So if they change jobs, they move to the employment plan of their new employer. Now, if more and more people don't have employers, what does that mean for the way in which we think about health, pensions, and a variety of things which traditionally we have associated with the relationship between individuals and the place in which they work, assuming that that relationship would be stable and long-lasting. And now, as you say, it is changing quite dramatically.